Oh, mama, I think it is on. Ooh, 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 ooh. Okay, okay, okay. Welcome to episode 5. I want to talk about my AI search platform journey. Um, and as I develop my platform, I want to share how I'm building it and yeah, just trying to build this in the open and hopefully eventually get some feedback. Right now, no one's watching these videos, but that's fine. um, Today, I'm going to talk about rich search responses. So again, what I'm trying to build is a perplexity-like product where you can use primarily to, research, search, and get information. It's a better tool, I believe, once you'll have a chance to check it out, than just using ChatGPT or AI chatbot, because as you can see in the screen that I'm sharing, first of all, the UX can be very rich, but also it's grounded in search results. So I always search regardless of the query. So that's number one. So you get responses that are grounded in web search, which can tend to be more interesting. And then it also combines the best of both worlds. It combines the best of what you'd get from a chat GPT, like an AI response, uh, with some, the latest data from the web. And to take it a step further, I actually call multiple APIs what I call providers. So these could be APIs or MCP servers, but these are official way of getting data from some platforms like Twitter, or X in this case, YouTube, etc., etc., etc. So if you can imagine, yeah, if you search for, say, sourdough bread recipes, not only you'll get a nice recipe like ChatGPT, but what if I can also search the web? Someone uploaded a nice recipe last week. I can sort of include not only a reference to that recipe in the search results, but also some highlights of it in the response. And maybe the recipe, if you ask my product for a recipe, maybe the recipe the AI generates has some highlights from that recipe that was uploaded last week. So it creates a very interesting sort of not only response but user experience. And I feel um, when you're trying to search and get information um, on really any subject, this creates a much better experience. Now, ChatGPT, etc., also are doing this many times. ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, they also search the web. By default, you don't have to explicitly say, but the approach I have is always search first, and also the approach I have is to penetrate a lot of these walled garden platforms in a much more legal and professional way, and I get very rich content back. YouTube's an example, but also another example is X platform. I'm also wanting to integrate Reddit, Hacker News, etc., um, Pinterest. There are lot of platforms that may support uh, legal, without violating terms and conditions, access, where it's a win-win. It helps me and my users, and it also helps the platform. So here I have a screenshot. I'm still not demoing the product, but this is a screenshot from the current build where there's a little bit of a bug if you can catch. But anyways, the content is very rich. Where this is the response is up above, which it's kind of truncated. I think the query is latest Elon tweets, and so the AI gives a nice summary. I've truncated that, but in this session, what I want to focus on is the sources. So what sources did the AI use to construct this response? In this case, it's primarily X platform, and the sources are nicely rendered with embeds. So this looks pretty cool, right? And you can think of this as also YouTube sources, right, with the nice embed. I think this creates a really compelling experience. No one is doing this today. I don't think so. Perplexity does maybe for one or two videos, but not for all the sources. My goal is to do it for all the sources. Google does it in their AI mode. ChatGPT does, and of course they list all the sources, but I'm providing the sources in a rich user experience, which I think benefits the user, and that's the mission of my startup: is to benefit the user, put the users in the center, and increase their productivity, increase their happiness, and fulfills my life's purpose. So now this is sort of the UX. What I want to talk about a little bit is behind the scenes, how I'm trying to build it. So this was my architecture before I had this sort of aha moment, because I was looking at Elon tweets, and all Elon was doing was responding or replying to other people. And so the structured sources or the sources UI was just showing Elon's sort of reply and a link to the post that he was replying, and so it was not being very useful. So I was like, how can I make it useful so that when you browse the sources that was used to generate this response, which is the latest Elon tweet, the sources are useful, and this is what I thought would be the most useful. So it shows his post, but also what he's responding to. There's a little bit of bug, by the way, here, which is fixed now. So how was it working before? So provider is just, in my case, a structured provider that either I have, a relationship with as a company, my company. We're using their APIs and paying them money, or they're giving us free access while following terms and conditions. And in the future, hopefully, I'm able to sign licensing deals with some providers. It could be Wall Street Journal or CNN or sources both on the right and left. So that's a provider. So I want to integrate many providers. It's funny, every time I do a video, someone's at the door. But right now I've integrated YouTube, X platform, search results feed. There's one more. There's one more, YouTube X. Oh, Google Maps, places search. So you can search for phone numbers and places and restaurants and attractions, things like that. It's a pretty good start. It's a pretty good list to start with. I'm super proud. So these are all providers, and before, when I would get a provider response, I would normalize. So you want to kind of make it LLM friendly, and this is actually pretty interesting. I mentioned in my previous videos, once you call all the providers and also include the pros from the LLM, like the response from an LLM, you put it all together, it's a very large piece of content. You can't just throw it at LLM, even if you can, like say Gemini, which has a 1 million context window. You're wasting money, time, and you're just not being smart. So this is a very important step to normalize DTube. And synthesis just means kind of calling the final AI-LLM call to synthesize the results. So normalize here means you extract the most relevant bits from the providers. Providers may include things that you may not need. Like for YouTube, they may include channel description or I don't know, something about the user or something about the video that may not be relevant, and so you can ignore that. In some cases, you can even strip, like the YouTube description, a lot of YouTube description, a lot of sponsor stuff. You can skip that. And then merge is when you have many results coming from a provider, but sometimes the provider could give you duplicate results, and so you're DD. And then synthesis is where you put it all together. So this was my architecture before. And then one thing I noticed was when I was calling the YouTube API, I didn't really get an embed URL because, like I said in the UI here, I'm starting to embed. And it creates, the nice thing is embed is before I was rendering the Twitter UI guard, the YouTube UI guard, I'm like, why am I doing this when I can embed? One downside of embedding is that it slows down, unfortunately, the page render and makes the page heavy because these are all iframes. And if I have 25 sources, I'm potentially loading up to 25 iframes. I have some thought about it to do it sort of post-response render in a graceful way, but maybe in the future I'll have some more optimizations. But that's the downside. But overall, I think the experience was so good that I stuck with it, the embedding. And also it's the recommended way all these platforms suggest to include anyways, so you're not breaking terms of service, and it creates a great consistent user experience. Like Instagram is another example. I will embed the Instagram post. Users are familiar with an Instagram embed because other news websites and other places also use the same embed, so it's consistent for the user versus me constructing a new UI. Okay, so now I updated the architecture and the design, and now what I do is this. I enrich. So this is the new step after merger. And the idea with enrich is you take the response or the entire response and try to enrich it. In this case, this is an example for YouTube. I'm enriching the response by including the embed URL, and I do a quick embed lookup to get the embed code. I'm not using any provider like iFramely or other providers. They all charge for something simple like this, which is crazy. I understand they're doing a lot of manual bookkeeping, but for me as a bootstrap startup, doesn't make sense at all. And so I would call an embed API or some other ways, and then get the embed code and the embed URL, and then enrich the response. And then the synthesis doesn't include the embed code. I don't think so. I should double check because that's a waste of tokens. But then we synthesize. But the enriched sources is then used for the final render of the response, which I don't have it here, I believe. Yeah, but anyway, this is the sort of the checklist I followed, create the enrichment service. So another thing I decided to do was create this embed service, like this whole enrichment as a service. And so the idea is that right now this is for YouTube, but any provider and anywhere I'm showing sources goes through this service, and it enriches all the sources. And so anytime I show source, the sources are looking much better. Like you get proper embed codes for sources that we understand. So that goes to the next question. What are the sources I want to support? So I started with YouTube and Twitter or X. They were the most obvious in my searches. But then I went and I looked around, and I asked myself, what would our users want? And one of the core tenets of the product I'm building or the platform I'm building is it has to be multilingual from day one, and it is global from day one. I know it's crazy, it's tall order, but it's something I wanted. Without it, I did not want to launch. It has to, someone from Japan should be able to use it in their language, in Japanese, and they should see the response in Japanese, and they should see some platforms, some providers from Japan, like in this case, their own social media platforms, and same for China. And so how do I do it? So this is where I use Claude Opus 4.5. So again, Claude Opus 4.5 is my favorite model. It's the most agentic, not necessarily the smartest. People on the internet they run these simple prompts to make games and everything. Excuse me. What's going on? Okay, sorry about that. Something was, I think maybe a timer. Oh yeah, it was a timer. Hold on a second. Okay. A lot of YouTubers, a lot of folks on the internet, run very simple prompts and identify which coding LLM is the best. For people like me who are building production grade, large scale infrastructure apps, large platform apps, that's not good enough. The code base is so large, and you're building something over a period of months and years. In my case, over a year. I've been at it. You can't. That's not the right test. For me, the right test is how agentic it is, because then they can look at the code if they forgot the information is not in the context. And also they're agentic in the sense that they can access the web search, deconstruct the problem, follow each one of the steps in a way, and auto compact the context when it runs out of context, and then know when to continue without me saying or doing anything. And for that kind of test, nothing today, absolutely nothing beats Claude Opus 4.5. Nothing comes close. The other so I paid $200 for Opus 4.5, but I also paid $200 for Codex. And Codex CLI, and I used the ultra high Codex 5.1 thinking model, so the top of the line, and even that doesn't come close. Another test is a design doc. I asked Claude Opus to write a design doc on this, and it'll be very detailed. I'll add ASCII diagrams and things like that, and I'll ask the same to Codex. Codex will come up with a 300, 400 line design doc, even though I've said be very comprehensive. Almost always, Opus 4.5's design doc is much more comprehensive in at least 1200, 1400 lines. Almost always. I'm not saying more is better, but you see the docs and you can tell a huge difference. So Codex is good. I use it in parallel with Opus, and I use it both together. I have tabs open for both, but Opus 4.5 is my go-to LLM for building this. And so I used Opus to do research. Like, hey, I don't know what video embed providers are out there. I focused on video embed for now, but maybe in the future other kind of embeds. I want to support, like Instagram also embeds photos, right? And then there are embeds for PDFs and GIFs and things like that. Anyway, focus on what, and I didn't know, and I just asked Opus 4, do this research, and it did this incredible research. This is all Opus, and it said China, you know, these are platforms, Japan, Korea, global, enterprise, monthly. It even included monthly users. I didn't ask for it, and then included like a check mark, like, oh, do they support iframe or not, or some other ways to embedding. And then it even gave me a priority, because it knows I always include a sort of some tenets of my platform in the prompt. And so it even said, for me, this should be the priority. And then it even gave me the embed codes, the CSP, params, etc. So I wanted to share this. This is like a blog post. I should just put this up on a blog post. Someone else can benefit. But yeah, and it even gave me an implementation priority recommendation, and then asked, should I proceed? So yeah, that's what I wanted to cover in this video. I also wanted to show maybe one last thing, how I configure this. I use like a YAML file, so that all these sort of endpoints and patterns for these different providers, and how to embed. I don't want to sprinkle in the code and hard code it, so I'm using this YAML file. I looked at GitHub to see if there are existing ones. There are some GitHub libraries, but none of them are refreshed, and none of them had the way I wanted. And so I just worked with Claude and just my own tinkering to come up with this. It's pretty cool, like even as Apple Music and SoundCloud and Spotify. It's pretty cool. So I love to put this on GitHub, like, you know, people can use, but then I don't want to put it on GitHub and I don't maintain it. So I have to figure out how, so that's why it's not on GitHub. But this is also, I wanted to show a really cool way to come up with a config file, externalize all of this, and then have your code just work with the config file, and then I can support any embed for all of these platforms. I just feel like a Superman after doing this research. And again, even this Claude helped me out. I did some, I had to guide it, because the first time I asked Claude, like, hey, how should I build this? It just gave me one Python file. I had to tell it, oh, no, I think I want to externalize. I don't want all this hard code, and then it did it. So these LLMs, they do a good job, but you have to kind of guide them for production scale, at least very large production grade applications. Today, they will not always follow the best practice. And sometimes they'll over anchor on best practices, and they'll think, I'm a 200 people company, and like I have all these like steps to kind of deploy and implement and everything. So I have to also tell it, like, hey, I'm working on my MVP, and there are no users, and so we want to be lean. So you have to kind of guide today the LLMs. And yes, I have a Claude MD file, a Codex MD file with some of this info, but it's not very consistent at following it. It uses it as a guide. It sometimes remembers, sometimes it doesn't. Both Claude and Codex, they're not consistent. Like I have stuff in that the seed markdown files, but they'll ignore it. So I have to remind them. So that's kind of the areas of improvement for today's top tier LLMs. They have to personalize. Like they have to know what practices, like how should I create a checklist? Like am I Google? And I have all these sort of rigor, or am I like a startup or 10 people, or am I a startup with no users and I'm still building my product, and kind of code accordingly and provide checklists accordingly and guidance accordingly. That's you need to do a lot of finagling today, at least for me. And I'm working with the top models. Like I'm paying $400 just for these two models, Codex and Claude. I also use Gemini. Maybe I'll talk about Gemini. It's not kind of meeting my needs today. It kind of falls short in kind of following instructions specifically. It's very smart, I can tell. But Codex and Claude are better. And Claude is another thing about Claude. It's so good is you can maneuver its sort of approach, like guide it while it's doing something. So like if it's like processing it, doing its agentic, you can still respond, and it'll honor it. It'll look at it. It'll kind of pause and then continue. Codex doesn't do it. Codex will just put your prompt in the queue, and after it's done, it'll look up your next one. It's kind of too late by then. So anyway, that's kind of today's session. I wanted to show how I'm building something like this. I think it will be really cool when this thing is out. I have a lot of links to my socials in the description. I'm not very good at marketing myself, but I gotta get better. So until next time, which should be tomorrow, and I don't know what I'm talking about tomorrow. There are a bunch of topics in my list, but I'll pick one. Yeah, until tomorrow. Hasta la vista. See you next time.